Your tactic may be struggling and conceding too many goals, or not just scoring enough goals, or maybe you're not retaining possession in games, or your tactic is just inconsistent. You can find out the answers in the Data Hub. Hello, and welcome back to DarkHorse FM. And in this video, we're going to be looking at how to make your tactic better using the Data Hub. We'll look at common tactical mistakes you can spot using the Data Hub. We'll look at Data Hub tools you can use to actually help you tweak your tactic. And we'll look at that Monaco team which just missed out on the League On title. We'll analyze 3 of our recent games and we'll see what we can find to help us tweak our tactic for next season. Now, Football Manager is a game with a constantly evolving database and match engine. This makes it all the more important to tweak your tactic game by game to give you an advantage over the opposition. It would interest you to know that the AI is also doing this. The AI sometimes tweak their tactic to actually match your team. The Data Hub can significantly improve our managerial skills, so it will serve as a guide throughout this tactic tweaking process. Data is becoming more and more relevant in modern football, and Football Manager offers an enormous volume of data in one comprehensive space. It's called the Data Hub. Now you can find insights on your team's performance as well as individual player performances, and you can tell if your tactic is working the way you want it to or if it's not. Now, the Data Hub is only limited to your team's performance on the pitch. This means that it does not predict the future. It only uses the data to show you what has been happening in recent games. It does not also help you scout potential signings. However, it does gather reports on your opposition to help you plan for games. We'll look at that later on in the video. Your tactic may be struggling and conceding too many goals, or not just scoring enough goals, or maybe you're not retaining possession in games, or your tactic is just inconsistent. You can find out the answer in the Data Hub. In the game against Marseille, we lost 1-0. We're the underdogs going into that game, and such a narrow defeat makes it difficult for you to pick out what exactly went wrong and how you can improve. Thanks to the Data Hub, we see that our XG was slightly lower than that of Marseille, and we played a bit wider when we were in possession. These slight changes against a top team in the league might just help us get something out of the game. We also see that we played a bit cautiously given where we recovered possession, but could we have won that game if we were a bit more aggressive and we pushed higher up? Who knows? Before we get into the data tools, let's talk about our staff. If you have already progressed in your Football Manager save, I'm going to assume you already have analysts in your staff. If you're starting a new save, you need to get data analysts in the coaching category. These are known as performance analysts. I recommend signing the ones with good knowledge of analyzing data and also judging player ability. I feel comfortable knowing that they can put the data into context and analyze opposition properly. You can ask the analyst at your club to fetch data depending on what you're looking for. You can head over to the top right corner in the Data Hub and then go over to ask for, and then here you can ask your data analyst to actually print you anything. So you can see some suggestions for your team's general performance and generally how to defend. The suggestions are based on what you really need to see. Like, let me say this is really important. Gaffer, check this out. So I'm just going to look at our team's defending overall. We had 0.88 conceded per game. Which for me is quite good, but I feel we could go lesser if we actually want to win the league. The fact that we finished second means that maybe 0.88 was actually a problem for us. We had 11 shutouts, so that's probably 11 clean sheets. And then we considered our final third passes per game. It was quite good, quite on the high side as well. And you can also see that we won possession a lot in the game. So we did well all season. We also conceded less goals, but we also see here that our opposition's passes per defensive action was high up in 5.4 and the league average is 5.24. I think it's slightly fewer passes, or we have slightly more opposition passes allowed, which is not good because I do want my team to press a lot, and it seems like we've given the opposition a lot of passes per defensive action before we actually go on to win the ball. We also see our set piece efficiency in here. We can see that Monaco has a low expected assists per game, although we do have a lot of crosses, but we're not scoring that many goals from our set pieces, so it hasn't been working so far. We need to actually go ahead and tweak our set pieces. That's also like my second gathering from here. But beyond these suggestions, you can ask for yourself what you want. I can just go over here and then go over to the scatter graph. Under the scatter graph, you can see whether you want team data or you want data on individual players. I'm just going to start from the team, and then we can see based on our team, we can see our pressing intensity, because they did tell us that we were not winning the ball high up the pitch. They actually allowed the opposition to pass a lot in our own defense, or to pass a lot around us. And we can see here that we have high number of opposition passes per defensive action despite having a high defensive line. So it probably means that we're not pressing as often as we ought to press. We can also see shot maps, and looking at our last game, we can look at our last 5 games for shot maps and then see how we're shooting because we weren't scoring enough. We have an XG of 5.61, but out of that we only scored like 2 goals. which is not very good, but we can see that we have most of our chances were taken with feet. But we can see our attacking efficiency, we do have we are aggressive and clinical, so we're in the top 4 quadrant where we want to be. So some slight tweaks to our system actually help us in there. In our game against Angers, we drew 1-1, and Angers actually had 72% possession in the entire game. Angers are an underdog team in the French league, so this is somewhat a shocking performance. At the start of the season, our tactic was focused on possession. As we moved into January, I played a normal tempo, tweaked it a bit to have a balanced passing directness and normal tempo using a positive mentality. And that probably affected our possession style. Is probably why we lost possession in some games. We might have to revert back to our possession-based style of play next season. We also struggled to score goals in some games, and our shooting hasn't been very good like we've seen in the data hub. So we're probably thinking of how we can walk the ball into the box a lot more. We also talked about how the data hub can show us individual player performances. If we swap between from the team tab, if you look towards the right, so you're going to see the player tab. You can just go over there and click players, and it's going to show you all your players and all the interesting data that you need to see. Remember, you can always ask your data analyst to give you something specific, but let's look at what the data analyst is actually showing us in here. We can look at our defenders crossing. We can see that lots of crossing and accurate crossing. Not a lot of my players are in there. That's because I used my fullbacks to play as one as a winger on support duty. The other was playing as an inverted fullback on defense, so we kind of formed a back three for us. And it's understandable why my crossing isn't so great from my fullbacks, no crossing defenders. So if I want to tweak that, it's just to ask my fullbacks to be a lot more adventurous, ask them to play wider, and then change the inverted fullback to maybe a wing back and then see what happens. Our main area is in goal scoring. We haven't been doing so well there. We can see our movement in attack. We have players that are dribbling a lot but are loose in possession, so we probably need to work on this and ask the player to dribble less if it's going to always be losing possession. We don't have anybody in the lots of dribble and reliable in possession category. It may mean that we're going to tweak our system to have less dribbles and then have the team play a possession-based style of play, so they won't be loose in possession and always running. So they only run when there's a space to actually run into. That's probably just one way of thinking about it. So now we'll take the notes we just gathered from the data hub into our tactics screen. We'll start with the changes where we want our team to play. Heading over here, I did start a new system, so there are no internal player instructions or team instructions at this point. So the first thing we want to do is for our team to retain possession. So we can start with shorter passing and slightly lower tempo. The original system we started with at the beginning of the season, that's the first setup we're going to add in. We also want our team to walk the ball into the box because we've been a bit wasteful with chances. But in order for us not to be too passive, because we can't use a balanced mentality playing this way, so we're either going to start with attacking mentality, and if it's not working at some point, we're going to shift to the positive mentality. But for now, it's going to be attacking with the shorter passing and slightly lower tempo. We also want to stop the opposition playing through our defense and stop them from having possession all the time. So we're going to head over to our pressing and then ask the team to press with a high press. And before, I think I was using a more often trigger press, but this time I'm going to push it all the way to a much more often trigger press. And our defensive line was quite high, but that didn't really cause us any problems. It had 0.88 goals conceded per game, I guess, so we can actually push the defensive line high and it's not going to cause us any problems. We are actually good defensively. Now the last thing I want to do is to ask my defensive midfielder to play as a ball winning midfielder on defend. I'm going to actually have to put somebody else for my playmakers. I'm going to bring in some playmakers, but instead of the defensive midfielder, I'm going to actually switch that and then have him contribute to the pressing and contribute to winning the ball back high up the pitch in order to stop that high number we have with opposition passes per defensive action. Now remember, we still have to observe what is going on in the match to see if our tactic tweaks are actually working. Another important aspect of tactic optimization is our opposition instructions, but before we get into that, we're going to look at our Saint-Etienne game where we actually won 3-1. We didn't take advantage of set pieces in this game, and sometimes in Football Manager, it's difficult to create goals from open play, so we can rely on set pieces for us to win games. The AI does this a lot. They've actually beaten me a lot of times, and that's how Saint-Etienne, to be honest with you, went on to score their goal. It's the difference between winning the league or the Champions League and finishing in second place. Set pieces. So I'm going to have a look at our set piece column and see what we were working with last season. I tweaked it to have this near post center, far post center, because I noticed that most of their crosses were coming to either the far post or the near post or the center, so I just had some players in there. But throughout the season, I tend to study the opposition's set piece pattern. You can find that in Data Hub as well. Head over to the Data Hub and look at the overview tab. You can see set pieces currently is blank because we are in a friendly period right now. The season is over, but you will find the information on set pieces here, and for further opposition instructions you can find it in the Data Hub as well. So once I study your position set piece patterns, I can then go ahead and switch this. If they normally cross to the far post, I can then drag my far post player to the number 1 slot. As soon as he gets there, drag this player over here. Okay, there are no players on the team, so he's not going to move. But yeah, drag the far post player over to the top and then have him be the one that is there. And just shuffle it around throughout the season and see how you can defend better. In attack, I'm not going to set this to far post anymore because we weren't scoring that many goals. I can probably move it to mixed and then adjust it game by game to actually have it either be near post or far post or edge of the area. Having one aiming to one location is not very useful in Football Manager because the AI adapts very quickly and they will just start defending that region and you can't score anymore. So the data hub also gives you insight on opposition. Like we mentioned, you can get into the next opponent tab over here and then look at the overview of the next team that you're going to be playing against. Currently, I'm in Monaco right now. Like I said, it's off season, so you have to go into the Man City save where you can find out information on the next opposition. Okay, this is awkward for me now because I realized that in my Man City save, since I came from Monaco to Man City, we have our next game against my old club in Monaco. So like you said, look at the list of our career since then. We started at Norwich and then eventually we're at Man City. Now we have to play against Monaco now, so they are our next opposition, which is interesting. So if we head over to the data hub and then head over to the next opponent tab, look at the overview, you can see the set piece patterns. Like I told you, we tend to cross to the central area. Okay, since I left the club, I think the new manager that is there now tends to cross to the center area. Look at the players that we're going to have to deal with. We have Kenan Yildiz that they've gone on to sign, Agudelo as well, and Patino is still the center forward in that team. When you're looking at the opposition, I encourage you to look at who their assisting midfielders are. I had a player in Mahia Alehu, as you can see here. He's a highly creative player. I know this guy is very, very dangerous. He is the one player that you're going to want to mark when you're applying your position instructions. Pay attention to also their players that are very defensive. They have creative defenders in Tom Roth. This is a player that is going to give you assists from deeper areas, key passes, dribbles. So he's the attacking wing back. Check where he's playing. If you look at the expected tactic, you can see where Tim Roth is. He's playing as their left back, so you're going to want to find somebody that is very good to actually go ahead and mark this guy, Tom Roth. If you look at his pace, he's not the fastest. What I like to do in this case is to play if this is the left back, my right winger is going to be somebody that is faster than the player that is playing at their left back. So it's just the way of looking at it. And then obviously have a very good player that is going to mark this Mihai Aleku, as you can see him here. I think those are the main things I like to pay attention to when looking at the opposition. You can also scroll down to next opposition performance to get a lot more data of what they're actually doing in that team. And you can see who their defensive midfielders are. Alehu is also in this place, very few blocks. So you can see here that their defenders are not the very best at making blocks or clearances, all this kind of stuff. So when they do win possession, they kind of move around. So it's possible to mark somebody, close somebody down. They're not going to just hoof the ball off away like that. Just a thought process of as to how Data Hub works for me and how I go about using it. You can just focus on the overview tab and get the main information here from the key findings by your data analyst. They're going to give you the key findings. You can use that to make a decision. Now, when testing out a new tactic or an optimized tactic, it's safe to do this in a friendly, but if you must start it in a new game, which I don't recommend, start it in a game against a team where you feel you can actually win the game. For Monaco, we're currently in preseason, so like I mentioned, most of those games are going to be friendly, so it's not going to give us enough data to work with, but it's going to help us train the new tactic that we've done. Another piece of advice is during my matches, I like to play them on extended highlights or comprehensive highlights to look up for those patterns of play while trying to adjust my tactic, just to make sure the patterns of play are working and what we're trying to implement is working the way that it should. I also look to see if my team is creating chances and if we're winning possession back the way that we want, that's higher up the pitch, or if we're winning it in our defensive third, we will have to tweak something. Of course, you can't control everything and it's not a perfect game. It won't be perfect, and that's the beauty of going over the analytics and making sure that everything sort of works, and then you can go back to it and make some tweaks, and just like that, make sure everything kind of just works out the way you want it to. Experimenting with the data hub is fun. It's a tiny bit of extra detail you can add to your Football Manager experience, so I encourage you to give it a go. If you already use the data hub, let us know in the comment section what you actually look for when you're in there. But if you don't, no pressure. You don't need to dive in headfirst into the data pool. You could just start with the team overview page and track your team's progress and performance throughout the season. When you feel more comfortable, you can dig deeper. That's it for today's video. See you next time. Enjoy your Football Manager.